Right. So I love that I'm seeing several of you comment that you asked ChatGPT and it gave you some ideas that were really good and that you hadn't thought of. That's fantastic. So this starts to give you a sense of what they will and won't be interested in. But we want to go a level deeper, right? The purpose of knowing who your ideal student is to know where they are, how to reach them, and also what they will respond to. Now, you could spend a whole bunch of time fleshing out demographics and psychographics, and we teach you how to do that inside some of our training programs. But the thing about lists of demographics and psychographics is that they don't give you the visceral gut feeling for who your customer is that you really need to inform your decisions. So I'm going to share with you a couple of shortcut exercises for figuring it out. And the first is something that I call the casting method. And the way it works is that you need to think of a character from a popular television show or movie that will be the archetype for your ideal customers. And this works because a big part of the reason why so many people watch these shows and movies is that they find the characters relatable. So you can trust that they're a good shortcut to describing your ideal customer because there are a lot of people like that. Now, it doesn't have to be recent television. It could be a show you watched a long time ago, but it does have to be popular media, TV, movies, books, etc. Because if the media is popular, it's because it speaks to an archetype. Now, I'm going to give you a few minutes to brainstorm. And you're going to brainstorm yourself, right? You can go to ChatGPT if you want, but start with your own brain. And you may or may not get it right away. Some people, it takes like a minute. They're like, boom, got it. Awesome. I'm good. Other people, they work at it. They don't quite get it. And maybe it clicks for you in a couple of hours or in a couple of days. But getting this right will really save you a lot of time later. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to just brainstorm and share your thoughts in the chat. To everyone who made the effort, even though the exercise isn't necessarily easy right off the start. And again, I know that it can be a bit challenging. So if you haven't quite figured it out yet, that's okay. It might come to you in a few hours or in a few days or a few weeks. So don't stress about it too much. But just in case, I'm going to give you one more technique, which is the younger self method. And the idea here is that you use yourself, but earlier on your journey. Now, there's a reason why I teach this exercise last after the casting method, even though it's easier for most people, right? We know who we were when we were earlier in our journey. The reason I teach it last is that it is risky, because we usually aren't completely representative of our markets. So this can lead you astray, but it can also be helpful. So we'll explore it as an option. And to help you avoid the pitfalls, the next exercise has two sides. I'm going to ask you, in what way is your younger self representative of your market, but also how are they different? And this is a question for you, not for ChatGPT, right? In what way is your younger self representative of your market that you're going after? And also, how are they different? Awesome. So now we have at least the starting point of a sense of who your ideal customer avatar is and what the topic of your course will be. And you might have noticed that these two things are like puzzle pieces. They only work if they fit together really well. So it's totally normal for one to inform the other and vice versa. And the more you get clear on one, the more it will help you refine the other back and forth. But now that we know our topic and our student, the next ingredient to a winning hybrid course is the outcome. Because most people aren't going to be as fascinated by or passionate about your subject area as you are. For most, it's a means to an end. It's a shortcut, as we've discussed, getting them to the outcomes they care about in less time, at less cost, and with less risk of failure. And fundamentally, the outcome that people will want always boils down to one of three core human desires, right? At core, just about anything we do in our lives comes down to one of these three core human desires. The first is money and security, right? And it's about, yes, I want to make money and save money, but I want to feel safe and stable in my life. That's what it really comes down to. The second is love and connection to other human beings. And the third is health and well-being. So some marketers like to shorthand this to getting paid, getting laid, and staying alive. But it's a little more rich than that. It is fundamentally about feeling stable and secure in our lives, feeling connected to other human beings, and being healthy and feeling well. And just about anything that we do, if you keep asking why enough times, you get to one of these three. And this is actually a really good gut check to see whether the idea that you're considering is valuable. You follow a 5 whys process, right? You ask a question, you say, this is what they want. Well, why do they want that? Okay, because of this. Why do they want that? You keep chasing it down. And at the end, why they care about it will go back to one of those 3 core human desires. So here are a few examples. You'd say, I want to get better at managing email. And that's presumably what your customer wants and what your course will provide. Why? Because I'm always feeling stressed about how many messages are in my inbox. Why? Because I feel like I'm missing opportunities and I look like I'm not on the ball. Why? Because I want people to respect me. So it's about connection to other people. Another example could be, I want to get in better shape. Why? Because I want to be healthier. Why? Because my dad was around my age when he died of a heart attack and I don't want to do that to my kids. I could say, I want to build and sell online courses. Why? Because I want to make more money. Why? So I can quit my job. Why? Because I hate being at the mercy of a boss who doesn't care about me. Or it can go in a different direction. I want to build and sell online courses. Why? Because I want to make more money. Why? So I can contribute to our household. Why? Because I want my spouse to see me pulling my weight. It's really important that you understand which core desire or core desires, plural, your course ties into, because that will inform your marketing in a very powerful way later on. Now, in a moment, I'm going to give you some time to practice this, but first I want to talk about how to do it with AI. And this actually brings us to a really powerful technique for working with AI in general. And that technique is called prompt stacking. You might remember this morning when I mentioned that one of the innovations of ChatGPT is that you could do more than just ask it a single question. You can have a conversation referencing previous answers that it gave you. So you can actually use prompt stacking to go deeper and deeper, just like you would with the 5 whys exercise. They give you an answer, it gives you an answer, I should say, and you come back with why. Why would they care about that? What deeper human desire is at stake? Or you could just ask it to do all of those steps in one shot with a prompt along these lines. You give it the context. There are 3 core human desires: money and security, love and connection, and health and well-being. Can you explain how a course about fill in the blank might tie into those desires? Now, I want you to note a few things. 1, I'm giving it context, and the more context, the better. 2, I'm not treating the answers as gospel so much as it's just helping me see other perspectives, but I know enough about my subject matter to know whether the answers make sense or not. Now, what I just put on the screen, this is an illustrative start, and that's all it is. It's a start. The prompt could be a lot better, and you're ultimately going to win if you don't just copy good prompts from me, but also learn how to formulate your own. So I'm going to give you a few minutes, and the exercise I want you to think about is, and share your thoughts in the chat, how might you improve this prompt to get even better results? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do that. All right, awesome. So we've covered 3 ingredients to a winning hybrid course idea so far: the topic, the student, and the outcome. And this is all important stuff, but it's also kind of like, marketing and course building 101 type stuff. So now we're going to start going to a higher level. The next ingredient is the context. And this is where a lot of people kind of like things go off the rails. So I'll explain the concept and then we'll talk about how it applies to your course. So there was this study conducted a while back where they would have people sit on opposite ends of the table. And the first group on one side, these are the tappers. It was their job to tap out the tune of a song, like Happy Birthday or something like that. And then the people on the other side of the table were the listeners, and it was their job to guess what song is being tapped out. Now, I want you to guess, put into the chat, what percentage of the time do you think the listeners were able to successfully identify the song? So I'm seeing 33%. It's flying by pretty fast, but okay, you guys can all read. So you see the numbers. So we've got a whole bunch of range. So I'll tell you what each person on both sides of the table guessed. The tappers figured, they should be able to guess about half the time. In practice, the listeners were only able to guess 5% out of the time. So the tappers thought you'd be able to identify the song 1 out of 2 times. In practice, they could only identify it 1 out of 20 times. Now, why is that? It's because the listeners didn't have context. When you're tapping out Happy Birthday, you got the tune playing in your head and the taps line up with the song. When you are just listening, all you hear is taps. There is no context. And context helps us make sense of what we are hearing. Now, I'm sure we've all had the experience where someone says, so what are you working on? What's your course about? We tell them, and we think it's super clear, but we get a blank stare and it's clear they didn't understand any of it. They're like, I don't get it. What are you even talking about? It's because the context is playing in your head, but it's not playing in theirs. And we need to give them that context. And you can do that with just a single sentence or two. When they say, what is your course about? Instead of answering, you start with one of two things. You either say, well, you know how, fill in the blank, and you establish some context. And they say, yeah, I do. Then you say what the course is about. Or you say, well, have you ever, ... What is the context? And then again, you can go into whatever the outcome is that you help people achieve with all the rest. Now, one of these two context setting questions will be so incredibly powerful. This is one of those unlocks. When people get it, it's like all of a sudden, people understanding what you do just shoots through the roof. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to start creating that context that you will share about what it is that you do. And I'm going to give you a couple of options. You can either experiment with different completions to this sentence, right? Pick you know how or have you ever and think of some additions to that. Or brainstorm prompts that would have ChatGPT do it for you. And I want you to notice something about how we are using ChatGPT. The point here is that when there's an exercise that you can easily do yourself, you just do it yourself and you're all good. But when you're stuck, you refer to the AI, you let the AI help you and get unstuck. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes and you have a choice. Either experiment with different ends to the context setting sentences, starting with you know how and have you ever, or brainstorm prompts that would get ChatGPT to help you with this exercise. So let's do that now. All right, awesome. Great job, everyone. Great shares in the chat. So we've got 4 ingredients so far: the topic, the student, the outcome, and the context. Now we come to the 5th ingredient to a winning hybrid course idea, which is the proof. And the point of a proof is that you want to share an example of your success, something that will give people confidence that all these things that you're saying are actually true, because talk is cheap. We all know marketers like to make things up and embellish their claims. So you want to share a precise and specific example that illustrates the fact that you can actually get them that outcome. And this can be the story of your most successful client. It could be case studies that you've read about if you don't have client experience because you're doing something new. It can be your own story. But whatever gives you the confidence that this will work, that's essentially what you want to share with them here. Now, odds are, for most of you at least, there are more than one thing that you could point to. So you have to choose. And that raises the question of, well, what makes really good proof? And there are two things. Good proof is relatable to where they are now and aspirational about where they want to go. So relatable means it speaks to demographics, circumstances, skills that are relatable to them. Aspirational is about outcomes. So you want to choose based on who you think your customer would relate to most in terms of where they are and who they are, and in terms of the outcome that they want. So if I'm talking to people about growing their businesses through online courses, and I want to share examples of people I've helped, I will choose the example based on who I'm talking to. So if I'm talking to a professional woman, I might talk about Patty Block, who is a business coach and works with women-owned businesses to help them position their pricing for growth. And I'll talk about how with her first 2 pilots, she made $15,000. If I'm talking to someone who's in a more esoteric field, I might talk about Chris Arning, who is a semiotics consultant and community leader in the semiotics field. Semiotics is the study of signs and symbols and their interpretation, so pretty obscure. And Chris works with media companies to help them with their semiotic messaging. I would talk about how Chris, between his pilot and his first course launch, made $30,000. If I'm talking to someone who is in the nonprofit space, I might tell them about Corey Melanson, who describes herself as a process facilitator. And she's also an instructional designer and curriculum developer. And I talk about how over the course of her first year, she generated about $175,000. If I'm talking to someone who cares about social justice issues, I might talk about Deborah Cady, who created a certification program for supportive adult allies of youth and young adults with mental health challenges, and how with her first 2 pilots and 2 launches, she made $145,000. Or if I'm talking to someone who has just been through a really tough financial setback, I might share my own story. Before this business, I don't know how many of you know my story. Before I even started this business, I was building a software company in the late aughts. And I was a young and inexperienced CEO, and it didn't work out. And I didn't want to tell my investors, who are friends and family, that their money was gone. So I walked away from that business experience with $250,000 in personal debt. And I went from there to building this business. Online courses changed my life, literally taking me from not just zero, but $250,000 in the hole to an 8-figure company. Now, you want to go through your own experience, your own stories, and find the proof that will be most resonant to the customer that you want to talk to. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to list out and share your best proof options. And this is one you can't ask ChatGPT for, because this is your experience, right? Think about examples of the success of your work that point to results that would be resonant to the person you want to talk to. All right, awesome. So you've got your 5 ingredients to a winning course idea: your topic, your student, your outcome, your context, and your proof. Now what's left is to put it all together into an instant credibility formula. Here's how it goes. You say, you know how, and then give them the context. Well, I teach your student, whoever it is, how to get this outcome through this topic. For example, here's an element of proof. So again, if you want to copy this down, go for it. This is the instant credibility formula. You know how? Context. Well, I teach student how to get outcome through topic. For example, proof. So here's an example of a real live filled in instant credibility formula. You know how we all have the potential to reach tons of people online with our expertise, but most people don't know how to actually do it? Well, I teach coaches, consultants, and expert entrepreneurs to create leverage, freedom, and impact in their businesses and lives by creating hybrid course businesses. For example, and here I would share whichever example I thought would be most resonant to the person I'm talking to. Now, we've spent the better part of an hour going through all of this for 3 reasons. 1, it is a very important marketing tool. 2, it helps you stress test your thinking to make sure you're actually building something that people will want. And 3, it equips you to start thinking about pricing, which brings us to our next topic, which is pricing your hybrid course. And a big part of why we did this whole exercise is that it helps you see the value of what you're offering to the market, which helps you figure out your price. But pricing is still tricky. So we're going to do it in 2 parts because there are actually 2 prices that you need to think about. There's the price for your very first course, the first one you offer while you're still working out the kinks. And then there's the price for your eventual course once it's finished and fully polished and all done, a couple of years down the road. Right now, I just want you to land on the price that you'll eventually charge when the course is done, when it's polished, and has a track record behind it in 1 to 3 years. And then we'll work back to the first course price later. And we do it this way because pricing can be a loaded topic. And it's easier to think about it in a clear-headed way with some distance looking into the future. So how do we do it? When we think about pricing exists on a spectrum from low to high. So at the bottom, there is a floor. This is the least you can afford to charge. If you charge any less than this, you'll be losing money on every sale. You're essentially paying people to take your course. On the high end, there's a ceiling. There's the most the market will bear. Everything in between is about positioning, how you compare to other options that are out there. And all 3 of these pieces, the floor, the positioning, and the ceiling, are informed by the transformation that you help people deliver. Now, some of you might feel an instinct to go super low, right? Maybe because you're serving a customer base that stereotypically doesn't like to spend money. But there are people who will pay a premium that is appropriate to the transformation you're offering in every market. Not all the people, but there are some of those people and enough to support a great business, as long as the value you offer justifies it. Now, the thing about pricing is that it's another one of those areas where it's very easy to tie yourself in knots trying to analyze, but that doesn't really accomplish anything. The best advice here, again, is not to overthink it. When you arrive at the right price, it tends to feel right. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to think it over, brainstorm some options, and just choose your eventual course price, the price that you will charge or that you want to charge for your course a couple years in the future. And please don't anybody type into the chat, well, I don't know enough, I need to do market research. We all know that this is not final and permanent. Just think about what feels like the right price. What are you calibrating against? What is it worth relative to other things that are available in the market? And tell us what that price should be that you're not committed to because it's years into the future anyway. All right, awesome. So I want to just congratulate and acknowledge everyone who picked a number and wrote it down. I know there's like a lot of baggage people have around pricing anything. So just congratulations for picking something. Now, whatever number you picked, make sure you've written it down on a piece of paper because we're going to come back to it later on. But now for this session, there's one more big topic that I want to talk about, and that is preparing to sell your hybrid course. And we're going to talk about a lot of strategic and tactical stuff. We have to start with mindset, and specifically about the fact that just about everything in life can be seen from different angles. Some are more flattering and some are less flattering. And this is especially true in business, in marketing, and in entrepreneurship. So here are some examples. Our session, our training today and tomorrow is live. It is not being offered as a recording. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, you can argue it's a bad thing because maybe it's not convenient for you, the timing, or maybe you want to be able to go back and rewind. Or you can argue that it's a good thing because it means that you are forcing your attention to be present and you're getting a massive download of ideas and information quickly in a way that otherwise would not hold your attention in the same way. We offered this training on a pay what you can basis, right? It wasn't free. There wasn't a fixed price. It was pay what you can. You could say that's a bad thing. Why do you have to decide what it costs? Shouldn't I decide what it costs? Right? Or you can say, well, that's so great. It's so nice to have the flexibility to be able to access this and decide what I can pay and have it go to a good cause. When you signed up, we offered you a free bonus ticket that you could claim with a $97 deposit to our August Teach a Gift Live event. You could say, well, why should I have another option that I didn't know was coming and I have to think about it? Or you could say, well, that's fantastic. 3 more days of training. And it doesn't cost me anything. I just put down $97 to save my seat. Different perspectives. Now, the thing about these different perspectives is that we all have insecurities. And they will try to skew us to look at things from the worst possible angle. And this is terrible for your own confidence, but also really bad for business because it is your job as a leader to help people see from which angle to look at things. That's what leadership really is. I'm not agnostic about whether the decisions I made in putting this all together for you are good or not. I think it's great for you that this is live. I think the pay what you can structure allows a lot of people to participate who couldn't otherwise and allowed us to raise a lot of money for a really good cause. I think being able to add 3 more days of training to this at your discretion is a great option. I have an opinion, and it's my job to show you which angle is the right one to look through. That's what leadership really is. Now, if you are committed to being a leader to your community, drop the word leader into the chat. If it's not like, it could go either way, how they want to see things, it's your job to show them how to see things, what the right angle is to look at things from, what the right perspective is. I see a lot of leadership, and I'm loving that. Well, that courage of leadership is really important because the fact is that you're going to have to sell your hybrid course, and it may not be easy. Particularly the first time you try to do it. It's going to be quite difficult. And it's going to be difficult for 3 reasons. The first of which is the fact that practice makes perfect. But the first time you do anything, you haven't had any practice yet, right? And there's nothing you can do about that, but be compassionate with yourself and accept that it won't be as easy the first time as it will be eventually. So put the word compassion into the chat. If you are willing to show yourself compassion, if you're like, yeah, this is going to be harder the first time I do it, and that's okay. Everything is harder before it gets easier. Awesome. I love that you are willing to show yourself that compassion. That's the first reason, because the first time you do it is the first time you do it, and you just don't have the experience or track record. But there are 2 more reasons why it is hard. One, there is a massive credibility gap that you have to overcome. And that has nothing to do with your credentials or your experience or how well known you are or you aren't in your field. It has to do with a very simple thing. When you say, I've got a course, do you want to sign up for it? There are 2 instinctive questions that will come up. The first is, well, who has gone through this course before? And what have the results been? And no matter how good you are at what you do, no matter how capable, no matter how many people you've helped in the past, there are only 2 possible answers to this question. Who has gone through the course before? Nobody, because it's brand new. And therefore, what have the results been? Well, nothing, because it's brand new. And you need to overcome that. And that, again, has nothing to do with your level of expertise or experience. It's just a matter of it being new. And there's another challenge with selling in general, which is the challenge of context that we talked about earlier. In your mind, everything is clear. But in your prospect's mind, you're coming out of left field. And that is never a recipe for success. You always want people to know that an offer is coming. You want them to be mentally warmed up before you make it. Just like I think you all know, if you're serious about this journey of hybrid courses and AI and you find value in this weekend workshop, that there's going to be a next step that I will invite you to explore. Right? Put the word clear into the chat if that's pretty obvious. You're like, yeah, of course. Right? I see it coming, and I'm maybe looking forward to seeing it. Put the word eager into the chat if you really want to know what I've got cooked up for you and how it can accelerate your business. Well, to everyone who is eager, I'm glad, but I'm not going to tell you yet. You're going to have to wait and find out tomorrow. We'll get to that. But the point is, you see it coming. There's no surprise, nothing coming out of left field. And the way to address the problems of track record and context is there's good news and bad news about it. So let's ask, which do you want first? Put good news or put bad news into the chat. Tell me which one you want. Okay, everyone wants the bad news. Almost everyone. Fine. So here's the bad news. The bad news is that in addition to these three constant challenges, there's actually another one that AI has introduced into the mix because of the spamification of information. Right? The market is already starting to flood with mediocre information-only courses, which is applying a lot of downward pressure on the price of those courses. Right? You're going to say, I have a course, and people are going to be like, oh, another ChatGPT created thing. I don't need that. I don't care. Now you might say, wait, Danny, didn't you say that we don't have to worry about that because you're teaching us how to create hybrid courses that actually deliver transformation and that's worth a premium? And the answer is yes. That is true, as long as people know that your course is different from all those other lousy ones. But if they don't know what's in there, then you're back at square one. But I've got you covered, and we're going to talk about how to make sure they know that. But you're going to have to be diligent about it, because if you're not, then it will be an obstacle. That's the bad news. But the good news is that there is a way to not just overcome all of these challenges we've talked about, but also use them to your advantage. This is actually one of my favorite strategies because it's basically like marketing jujitsu that turns an apparent disadvantage, like being smaller and weaker than your opponent, and turns it into an advantage. And what I'm talking about is seeding demand with a narrative of co-creation. And this is a strategy that has driven probably more sales than any other single thing that I've done and taught. And it is based on some pretty interesting research coming out of Harvard, Yale, and Duke universities. So these teams of researchers, they would have people come in and assemble things, right? To assemble all kinds of different things. And one of the things that they had these people assemble was IKEA furniture. And that's why the phenomenon that they discovered came to be known as the IKEA effect. But here's how it worked. They had two groups of people who were essentially asked to come in and put a price tag on the object that was built. First were the builders, the people who came in, built the thing, and they were asked, what do you think this thing should cost? Put a price tag on it. Then they took those people out of the room, and they had strangers come in, and they were asked, what do you think this thing that already is there should cost? What should the price be? Those were the evaluators. Now, here's what the research found. People were willing to pay more for the pieces they built themselves. In a variation of this study that I found fascinating, they had stuff built by two different groups of people. One was normal, regular people, right? Like me and like you. Put the word IKEA into the chat if you've built some IKEA furniture over your life, right? We all have. It's like a rite of passage. And if you're like most people, you build it and it's good, but it's not perfect, right? You know, this piece is screwed in a little too tight. That piece is just a tiny bit cracked. It's a little wobbly over here. That's how the regular people built it. But then they had other people building furniture. And these are people who are professional IKEA builders. Building stuff is their job. And so when they do it, it's perfect. And they asked people to assess, well, what would you pay for these things? And they found that people were willing to pay more for imperfect pieces they built themselves than they were willing to pay for perfect pieces built by somebody else. That is about creating value. It's called the endowment effect, technically speaking, by creating a narrative of co-creation. They are part of the story of the creation. So our goal is to leverage the IKEA effect by engaging your students as co-creators of your hybrid course. And this turns the lack of a proven track record from a bug to a feature. And it also seeds demand. So when you have those initial conversations, asking what they want and what are their challenges and what course will help them, you gather that information, they know that you're actively working on the problem. So when you come back to them and say, hey, I have this course, you're not coming out of left field. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about how to do that this afternoon. But first, we are going to take a break. So as with the previous break, get some fresh air, go outside, Do not dive into your email and your messages. Allow the ideas to percolate, allow them to gel, and come back refreshed at the top of the hour. And we will jump into the last session of the day, all about the practicalities of using AI to create that narrative of co-creation and seeding demand. Thank you. Awesome. While we're waiting to get back started up, if you guys want to share your best takeaway from the last session, it'll help with your learning, it'll help your peers, and I would like to see it too. Awesome. Sorry, I'm realizing you guys can't see me reading, or I guess if you can, it just looks like I'm looking away. But I love that you guys. Again, there are themes. A lot of people are appreciating the IKEA effect, the endowment effect that kind of comes out of that. Some of the different marketing stuff, some of just how powerful ChatGPT can be, but also a nice diversity of topics that people are taking away from our training as well, which is awesome. We're going to keep going in just a few moments. Let's see how many people are here. We've got almost everyone here. Show of fingers if you guys are ready. Let's just get to it. All right, you guys are ready. All right. Excuse me. All right, welcome back. So far, we have talked about mindset for success, prerequisites for success, prompt engineering, instant credibility formula, the narrative of co-creation, and the need to seed, and pricing your hybrid course. Up next, we will talk about making your course stand out, pricing your first hybrid course, tactics for seeding demand, as well as elegant and ethical selling. So let's start with how to stand out. And this is fundamentally about answering the question, why you? There are a lot of options that your customers can choose from. Why should they choose you? And we already talked about this a little bit in the context of pricing, that it comes down to positioning, right? How do you position against the competition? And there are 5 different kind of positioning strategies. So I want to quickly walk you through all of them so you can choose the one that feels best for you. First strategy is the lowest price. Your positioning is that you are the lowest price in the market. I do not recommend that to anyone but a very large company with enormous economies of scale, but that is a positioning direction. Another positioning direction is most comprehensive. Again, I don't recommend that for most people because that requires that you have very substantial resources to stand behind. It gets more interesting when we start looking at a focused niche. When you have a focused niche, it means I am the go-to solution for fill in the blank, right? There may be a lot of business coaches, but I am the only business coach who serves yoga professionals who integrate EFT into their yoga practice, right? Narrow focused niche. You're the go-to for that market. Another positioning direction is brand differentiation, right? A big part of why people buy Apple is because it is Apple. It is the Apple brand. And yes, the design is nice and the technology is good and all that kind of stuff, but there's a lot about the Apple brand, right? This association and affinity. And then finally, my personal favorite is methodology, positioning around a unique methodology or mechanism that you have to offer, right? Nobody else can do what I do because I have this unique approach. So I'm going to give you a few minutes. I want you to think about, and you can't go to ChatGPT for this. This has got to be you. Think about which feels like the best fit for you and your business. Share your answer in the chat, as well as your thinking for why that is the right answer for you. right. So armed with some clarity around how you stand out, we are ready to talk about pricing your first hybrid course. Now, we've already talked a little bit about pricing, and we're going to go deeper now. And the thing about pricing is that you can come at it from two very different directions. And if you don't look at both of those directions, then you're missing something important. And we talked about one of those directions today already when we explored how the price that you charge splits three ways to support your customer acquisition and fulfillment and contribution. And when we talked about the transformation that your students are looking for, these are all economic arguments for why a price makes sense, right? Reasonable margins, return on investment, cost benefit analyses, etc. And that economic argument is really important and very powerful. And it is exemplified in the story of the nuclear power consultant. So the way the story goes, there was a nuclear power plant and they realized they've sprung a radiation leak, which is obviously a very big deal. And they try to find the source of the leak and they can't find it. And they bring in different consultants. Nobody can do it. Finally, they're like, this is urgent. We've got to get this solved. They reach out to the world's leading expert on this particular kind of problem. And they fly him in and he walks around their plant for 10 minutes and he takes a black Sharpie out of his pocket and he draws an X on a pipe and he says, that's your leak. That's where you've got to plug it. Then he leaves and he sends them a bill. And the bill is for $30,000. And so they reply and they say, can you please send us an itemized bill, which is corporate speak for like WTF. And he says, sure. And he sends them the itemized bill and it has two lines. Black Sharpie, $3. Knowing where to put the X, $29,997. And the story makes perfect sense. The outcome was worth it to them. Stopping the leak was priceless. They couldn't get it from anyone else. And so it really makes the point for that value-based pricing. But there's another dimension that you want to consider when you think about pricing, which is the emotional side of it. People need to feel that a price is fair. And seen in that light, the nuclear power consultant story has a very different feel to it, right? More like someone gouging you because they can. Dan Ariely, who is the famous behavioral economist who wrote the book Predictably Irrational and other books, he tells the story of a locksmith. And the locksmith explains that when he was young in his career and inexperienced, he would work super hard. He would sweat. He would really have trouble fixing a lock because he wasn't that good at what he did yet. And so it would take a long time and he would look stressed. And sometimes he would break the lock and they would have to buy a new one. But nobody ever complained about his fees. But now he is an experienced and very skilled locksmith, and he never breaks the lock, and he never looks stressed, he never even sweats. He just takes 5 or 10 minutes, fixes the lock, it's all good. And now everybody complains about his fees. They're like, what? How much? You were just here for 5 minutes. What's up with that? And the lesson is that it's not just important that the price be fair, as it is for the locksmith, as it is for the nuclear power consultant. It also needs to feel fair. So with that as context, let's talk about how we figure out the price for your first run at your hybrid course, which we call the pilot. Now, you already know the price for your full hybrid course way down the line. And there are two pricing levers that you can pull. The first is the proportion of content and outcomes. So your pilot, your first run is going to be much less thorough, much less complete. Maybe you don't cover as much. It's not going to be as polished. So that's one dimension, right? Let's say, for example, it's 50% of the total content. So you dial it back by 50%. And most people understand that pretty easily. But there is a second lever that you can pull, that you must pull, which is the proportion of attention and interaction with you. Right? So maybe there's half as much content, but they're going to get twice as much access to you and direct feedback from you. And that is worth something too. And you've got to adjust the price based on that as well. So you can actually charge a lot for a pilot. The reason I share this is that a lot of people have an instinct that your pilot has to be cheaper. It has to be a discounted version of what you're eventually going to do. And in fact, in my experience, the range runs that the pilot will be anywhere from 1/5 to 5 times the price of the full eventual course. And I've seen it both ways. I sold a course for many years about course building. We sold it for $2,000 or $3,000. We piloted it twice. One for a high-level boot camp that cost a few $100s, and once with a 5-day intensive where people would get on a plane, fly to my house, and that was a $10,000 investment. And both worked great. Right? And you pull the lever in whichever direction makes sense. I mentioned earlier our ACES Business Acceleration Coaching Program. It's a $27,000 price. When we piloted it for the first time, it was about a third of that. Now, it included a lot less. It was a lot less comprehensive, a lot less effective, right? But about a third. So it's still in that range. Now, I'm going to give you a few minutes, and I want you to think through and arrive at your pilot price. And the way you do it is by starting with your eventual course price. And then you adjust down based on the content and outcomes, and up based on the attention and interaction that people will get. Our price for our hybrid course, right? We've got the eventual price and we've got the pilot we're going to start with, which remember is supposed to be a premium price. We should take a minute to talk about the phenomenon of sticker shock, which is very common when we're talking about premium prices. And we all know what that feeling of sticker shock feels like, right? It's this feeling of, what? It costs how much? Are you effing kidding me? Right? It's an emotional reaction that can range from shock to outrage, sometimes even anger, none of which are conducive to a good customer relationship or to closing a sale. Now, it is important to understand what sticker shock actually is and what it isn't. And it's not a sign that your price is too high. This is something people often misunderstand, right? If someone has a reaction of sticker shock to your price, it doesn't mean your price is too high. But what it does mean is that there is a big gap between their expectations and what you quoted, right? If you find out that a Mercedes costs $70,000, you're not outraged, you're not shocked, because that's kind of what you expect it to cost, right? You might not buy it, but you don't have a strong emotional reaction. And there is a threshold above which sticker shock is pretty common, and I call it the grocery store threshold. So here's the basic idea. Most large expenses in our lives we plan for. We think about them. We know they're coming. The big exception is when we go shopping for groceries, right? Because you can wake up in the morning not expecting to go shopping for groceries. You open the fridge, you realize, oh, I'm running out of milk, so I might as well go to the grocery store. And while I'm there, I'll pick up all the stuff I need. And there is an amount that you can plausibly spend on a trip to the grocery store. And that amount will vary depending on where you shop and how many people you're shopping for and how often you tend to go. But it's usually anywhere between $50 and $400, right? And wherever that threshold is for you, that's a number where there's no expectation with your significant other. You're going to have a conversation about it. And even though you didn't have a plan to spend a couple $100s today, you could plausibly spend that money, even though you woke up not intending to, right? And so we don't have that feeling of sticker shock all that often when we're under that threshold. But once we get over that threshold, which is not that high in the grand scheme of things, we suddenly get into a place where I'm hearing about this offer that you're putting together. You're presenting me with this offer. And I hear the number. And my first thought is, whoa, I was not planning on spending that kind of money today, right? What the hell? Where did this come from? And that's a lot of what's happening here. So it is just not too much, not necessarily a bad price, not something they would not even be comfortable spending. It's just more than they could conceivably have planned to spend today without planning. So how do you overcome sticker shock? Well, there are a couple things you want to do. First, give them time to get used to the idea, right? So hint and frame early. Some of you will have noticed how I've been mentioning my ACES Business Acceleration Program, and I've been telling you what it costs. So eventually, when I talk about how I can help you move forward, you're like, okay, I get it. I know what kind of category of price we're talking about. So give them time to get used to the idea. Hint and frame early. Second, present value before price. Never lead with the price, right? Sometimes people will try to get around it. They'll say, well, what does your program cost? But you don't want to start with the price, not because you're withholding information, but because price doesn't mean anything without context. right? If I tell you, hey, I've got this program, it costs $27,000, and that's all I say, all you know about the program is it costs $27,000. What do you get for that $27,000? I don't know. So there are 27,000 reasons not to buy it, but there are no reasons to buy it. So let's make sure they understand the context and what the $27,000 pays for before you get around to that. So give them time, so hint and frame early, and present value before price. And this will diffuse the emotional reaction. But you may still face some price resistance because it's more than they were expecting. So you might still get a reaction of, well, that's a lot of money. Put it's a lot of money into the chat if you ever get that reaction. Someone says something to the effect, it's a lot of money, it's too expensive, right? It's a big price. You get that reaction. You're like, I don't know how to handle it. Okay, it's very common. Well, I will tell you exactly how to handle it. I'm going to give you a template approach that is hyper effective in dealing with that resistance and that objection. So I'll give that to you, but we'll do it a little bit later in the session. For now, let's get back to the topic of tactics for seeding demand, because we started talking about demand and seeding demand and narratives of co-creation. And we have two goals when we're seeding demand. First, we want to give people the real sense that they are part of creating it, right? Narrative of co-creation. And second, we want to create context so they know that an offer is coming. Now, I want to clear something up, which is about the role of market research. Where does market research fit into this? And the answer is that you get those market insights through the seeding process. And we'll talk a bit later about how you can use AI to supercharge those market research efforts. But with that being said, I don't want you to think of it as market research. I want you to cross the words market research out of your mental business vocabulary. Because when you say market research, it evokes the image of taking your time and poring over data and spreadsheets. But a core part of what we're doing with seeding is creating that context. And the flood of AI produced content that is already appearing on the scene is just making this worse. And to be fair, stats about attention spans are usually oversimplified and misleading. So if you want a more detailed account, a great book to read about it is called Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. But until and if you read the book, take my word for it. The upshot is that you have to do the seeding quickly. If it takes you months to do your, in air quotes, market research and talking to clients, by the time you circle back around, the context is gone and it's too late. So put the word quickly into the chat if you understand that, okay, this market seeding, it has to happen quickly, like a sprint, not like this gradual thing I do over the course of months or years. Okay, you get it. Cool. So with that as framing, there are 4 strategies that I typically reach for when I am seeding something new or coaching someone else through doing the same thing. There are 4 strategies. The first is the pre-sell email campaign. The second is enlisting partner support. The third is free coaching calls. And the fourth is personal network outreach. Now, I'm going to explain how to do all 4 of them. But I want to answer a question first. Why am I giving you 4 strategies? Why not just give you the one strategy that you should use? And the reason is that I do not have one strategy that will work for all of you. There are 700 and change people on this call, close to 800 people on this call. You're all in different businesses. You have different contexts, different things to work with. I don't have one strategy that will work for all of you. But between these 4 strategies, at least one will work for every single person here. So at least one will work for you. But here's the deal. You've got to listen and pay attention to all 4. You can't listen for a minute and be like, oh, that one's not relevant to me. I'm going to tune out and play Candy Crush for a bit. Because they all relate to each other. And the more you understand one, the more you understand the others. So here's our deal. I promise at least one of them will work for you. You promise to pay careful attention to all 4. If that feels fair, put the word fair into the chat. And I'll take a sip of my drink while you guys confirm. Wonderful. Okay, we have a deal. All right, so one more thing I want to say before we jump in. I want to make a comment about selling courses into companies. I often get asked, what's the difference between selling a course to an individual and selling it to a company? And the short answer is that yes, there are some differences, but they're not as big as you might think. So yes, the strategies that I'm going to share do need to be modified a bit to work in a B2B context, but fundamentally, they do all work in that setting. So with that being said, let's jump in, starting with the pre-sell email campaign. And this is the archetypal strategy for launching a pilot program to your audience. So here's what the sequence looks like. You start by floating the idea to see if people are interested. Hey guys, I'm thinking about creating a course on blah, blah, blah topic. What do you think? Might you be interested in this? And then, presuming there is some positive feedback, you say, great, okay, now I'm asking for specific input. People seem interested. I'm thinking about doing this. Answer my short survey. Help me understand what you want to make sure that I cover. Then you review the results and you come back and you announce, all right, I've decided I'm going to do it. Then you give them a sneak preview of what's coming. Then you start enrolling students into your pilot. You answer their questions, you reinforce the benefits, and finally you tell them it's their last chance to sign up because the class starts tomorrow. Now, I want you to notice that there is a progression to this kind of messaging. And you only go through all the steps if people are legitimately interested. If you ask, hey guys, I'm thinking about creating this course, and the resounding feedback from your market is that they are not interested, don't proceed with all the steps, right? Change your plans. Now, this is not an overly complex sequence to put together. And if copywriting isn't your strength, AI can help you write these emails, just so long as you give it really specific instructions about what you want the email to be about, what you want the call to action to be, what tone you want for the voice, etc. And I think you get it. We're back to the idea of giving AI hyper-specific instructions. So let's practice that. I'm going to give you a few minutes to write a prompt asking ChatGPT to write an email in a marketing sequence like the one we just outlined.